when we believe in who Jesus Christ is and what he did for us on the cross, God gives us a power, the power of the indwelling Holy Spirit inside of us to be and do what we cannot be and do on our own. So Daniel was an overcomer because he was a true believer in God. And then he made daily choices. He chose to love God more than he chose to love pleasing himself.
Hey there, it is Faith Talk Today. I'm Rick Probst. Hope you're having a wonderful weekend. Thank you for joining us for Faith Talk Today. We've had some stellar guests on the show. In fact, before me is one of our stellar guests. We always enjoy having David Wheaton on the show. He is, of course, the host of the Christian Worldview. David, how are you?
Doing really well, Rick. It's great to be back on with you.
Hey, that is a really cool cap that you have on there. I'm going to, do you have those that people can get a hold of on your website, or is that just for David?
Well, no, this was at our annual golf event last year. We do a golf event every September, and these were made for the golfers. But I'll tell you what, we're going to send you one after this interview today. So you're just going to let me know your address and we'll get it down to you.
Well, that is awesome. It looks good. I had forgotten you had that, the golf tourney. I assume that you'll be having another one then.
We are actually. So we do one annual fundraiser. The name of the nonprofit foundation that directs the Christian Worldview radio program is called the Overcomer Foundation. And that's a scriptural word. You know, Jesus said, in the world you have tribulation, be of good cheer. I have overcome the world. So it's called the Overcomer Foundation Cup, sort of named after the Ryder Cup. And the event actually is held at a really incredible place. It's held at Hazeltine National Golf Club. And people around the country who are golfers are very familiar with Hazeltine. It's hosted Ryder Cups, the U.S. Opens, and all sorts of major events. It's hosting the U.S. Amateur this year, the Women's PGA Championships 2 years from now. So we're very blessed to have the event there. And every September, the middle of September, which is a gorgeous time of year, by the way, here in Minnesota, heading late summer into fall. So we look forward to that event every year.
Now, that event, is that open to just anyone? So our viewers and listeners, they could sign up and enjoy themselves?
We would love to have your viewers and listeners come up to that event. It's Monday, September 16th. Again, it's rare to get a chance to play Hazeltine. And we'd love to have them come up. It's open. It's all in support of the Christian Worldview radio ministry. So they can find out more about it by going to our website, thechristianworldview.org.
Awesome. We love that. David Wheaton with us today. And as he mentioned, thechristianworldview.org is how you can check out many resources there. Of course, you can listen to the podcast, listen to the show on Faith Talk Atlanta. And David, recently you were at a church. You spoke on being an overcomer in an oppositional world from the life of Daniel. And what a great story. And you kind of throw in there just some tidbits on the Super Bowl and how the culture is doing and things you noticed during the Super Bowl. Let's talk about it.
Yeah. Well, you know, if you watch the Super Bowl, this is really the cultural zeitgeist of our day. It's the most watched U.S. television program. Matter of fact, this year was the most watched ever, with 123 million viewers. Mm-hmm. Probably has something in part to do with that Taylor Swift was there. But anyway, being that's the most watched event, it is also the most expensive event to reach those viewers through advertising. And so the ad revenue last year, it hasn't come out for this year yet, but last year was $600 million in ad revenue. This year will probably be more, but a 60-second ad was $14 million for 60 seconds. And so you have to ask yourself, why are there so many viewers, and why is it so expensive to reach these viewers? Well, the answer is because the show, so to speak, being presented and the wares being offered during the breaks are what the organizers of the Super Bowl and the advertisers believe is most appealing to Americans. So, Rick, what are those things that they think are most appealing to Americans? And number one, obviously, it's the sports game. You know, kind of passive entertainment appeals to Americans. The celebrity is a huge thing. They go from suite to suite, showing, you know, who's who of who's there. How many times do they go to the Taylor Swift suite during the Super Bowl? There's the culture of partying and drinking and gambling that surrounds the Super Bowl. And Rick, maybe you noticed this, but it seems like probably 90% of the ads during the Super Bowl have something to do with a really elementary kind of inane humor as well. Just make people laugh. And then, of course, there's the sensuality and everything else. So this is what the Super Bowl and the advertisers think most appeals to Americans today. And I think it's fitting that it was held in Sin City. But this is not to say, I'm not trying to be a legalist here and say, don't watch this football game. I'm just saying, be aware of what this culture is trying to sell us today.
David Wheaton with us. He is the host of the Christian Worldview. Let's talk about the message, being an overcomer in an oppositional world. And this world is oppositional. How do we handle that? And as you bring out Daniel's story, which is one of our favorites, tell us more.
Yeah, it's an incredible true story of Daniel. He lived about 2,600 years ago. He was born and raised until he was about 15 years old around Jerusalem in an affluent and an influential, noble kind of family. We would call Daniel today what the word is privileged, the kind of family that he was raised in. But because Judah, the Israel was divided into two parts, Israel in the north and Judah in the south, because they had so gotten away and been so disobedient to God, God allowed an ungodly empire, Babylon, with King Nebuchadnezzar over it, to come down. And as a consequence for their disobedience, Nebuchadnezzar came down and attacked Judah and Jerusalem, razed the temple, and took captive all kinds of Jews and removed them basically about 1,000 miles directly to the east to Babylon in this empire. And this was a completely different culture and land and language. But for Daniel and his three friends who are taken there, and there are many others, but they were brought because of their background into actually the king's palace. And they were to be raised, better word is indoctrinated, in all the customs and education and language. Actually, their names are actually changed so they could serve in the king's service as personal servants to him as they would get older from age 15 and up. And so right away, they were fed the king's choice food and wine. All the pleasures, everything of the world was really available to Daniel. For being taken captive, he certainly was put into an incredible situation where the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the boastful pride of life was all being offered to him. Just conform and comply to this Babylonian culture. And Rick, I would say to you that the culture then in Babylon probably wasn't very much different. Different things, perhaps, but not very much different than the culture being offered in today's Super Bowl. And then Daniel said something very interesting when he saw all this presented to him. It says in Daniel 1, verse 8, this is the key point of the entire story of the character Daniel himself. He said, but Daniel made up his mind that he would not defile himself with the king's choice food or with the wine which he drank. So he sought permission from the commander of the officials that he might not defile himself. And the reason he did that is that he, growing up as a Jew, was not to eat certain kinds of food. Mm-hmm. And secondly, all that food that was being offered to him, the choicest food of Babylon, was food that had been sacrificed to their many, many idols and false gods. And so to eat that food was to participate in this ungodly culture. And so that's where Daniel drew the line. And that's why he was able to go into this world. By the way, he lived there for the rest of his life. And he somehow navigated being a strong believer and follower of God in the midst of a very contrary or opposing culture. And I think he sets a great example for how we can do that as Christians in our culture today.
Well, let's talk about that. How can we do that? It's a mirrored picture, as you mentioned, Babylon and where we are now in our culture. It's pretty much the same. So how do we overcome?
Well, that is the question. And that word overcome is an important word. That's one that Jesus used himself in John 16:33. He told his disciples, one of the last things he told them was, in this world, you will have tribulation. And don't we know that's the truth? But be of good cheer. I have overcome the world. And that word overcome means to prevail or to conquer or to have victory. It's from a Greek word, that a Greek goddess of victory was named after, Nike. We all know that as a sports brand company. This goddess who had wings, who would hover over the battlefield and help the Greeks and the Romans be able to have victory in their battles. And the number one key to being an overcomer is what it says in Hebrews chapter 11:6, Rick. This is the Hall of Faith chapter, as it's called. Mm-hmm. It starts out by saying, without faith, it is impossible to please God. For he who comes to God must believe that he is, in other words, that he exists, and that God is a rewarder of those who seek him. That's Hebrews 11:6. And I think that describes Daniel. Daniel believed God. He believed that God existed, and he believed that God is a rewarder of those who seek him. So it really was a ratio almost, Rick, of what we love most in life. Do we believe God? Do we believe that he's a rewarder of those who seek him? Do we love him more than we love the things that the world offers us, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the boastful pride of life? And by the way, those three things sort of encapsulate everything that the world tempts us with. And you go right back to the beginning in Genesis chapter 3, when Eve was tempted by the serpent. What was the narrative? It says, when the woman saw that the one tree that they weren't supposed to eat from, saw that the tree was good for food, there's the lust of the flesh, feed my flesh, that it was a delight to the eyes, there's the lust of the eyes, beautiful to look at, and that the tree was desirable to make one wise, she took from its fruit and ate. And the desirable to make one wise, that's the boastful pride of life. It makes us feel exalted. And so these are the same three categories of temptations that are constantly being foisted upon us. But we can overcome them, number one, Rick, when we've been born again. And that's the key thing. Jesus said to Nicodemus, you must be born again, because when we're born again, Christ is and what he did for us on the cross, God gives us the power of the indwelling Holy Spirit inside of us to be and do what we cannot be and do on our own. So Daniel was an overcomer because he was a true believer in God. And then he made daily choices. He chose to love God more than he chose to love pleasing himself. And that's how he was able to overcome in a very oppositional culture.
So good. David Wheaton, host of the Christian Worldview. We're just about out of time, David. We want folks to be able to either watch or listen to that message that you preached, being an overcomer in an oppositional world, from the life of Daniel. And we'll have the link for those that want it at FaithTalkAtlanta.com. And I know my executive producer, Ezra, will put that together, and it'll be for those so you can not only watch it and listen, but you can pass that on. David, thank you so much. We appreciate you. Would love to catch up with you before the summer so we can talk about the Overcomer course that's coming up. We'll talk about the golf tourney that's coming up in September and more, and what's happening, because the news is always being made. And I know those are the things that you address in the Christian Worldview. So we want you to listen to it, and you can watch it, of course, at FaithTalkAtlanta.com. and on 970 WNIV. David, thank you so much. We got to go. Hope you have a great week. We'll check in with you next week on Faith Talk Today. See ya.